This is Film Focus with Emily Cook.
Welcome to the 5th episode of Film Focus, the April edition. In this episode, I'll be joined by my co-host Sarah and we'll review the new release Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Our special guest joining us a little later is world-leading feature film colourist Paul Ensby. Paul will give us exclusive colourist commentaries of the trailers of 4 of his most recent films, including Amy, Man From U.N.C.L.E, The Lady in the Van and Allegiant, explaining what it was like working on the films, including intriguing behind-the-scenes insight. He'll outline the role of a colourist, how you go about forging a career as a grader, and we'll ask him about what happened when he worked with legendary director Lord Richard Attenborough. We'll let you know of any filmmaking opportunities and events on the horizon, and as if that wasn't enough, we're going to discuss our top 5 films created by women. I'm joined once again by our resident film fan Sarah, who watches at least 7 feature films a week. Hello Sarah.
Hi Emily, how are you doing?
Excellent, thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I'm not bad. I have just got over a little bout of flu, but feeling perfectly fine and wonderful today.
Well,
thank you.
There's been a lot of it going around. You'll be updating us on your exciting 500 film challenge a little later. Can't wait for that. But first, let's take a look at our featured film this week.
The greatly anticipated superhero film Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice is the latest film from director Zack Snyder. The film stars Ben Affleck as Batman, who, worried that the actions of Superman, played by Henry Cavill, are left unchecked. Batman takes on the Man of Steel, while the world wrestles with what kind of superhero it really needs. The film has been rated a respectable 7.3 on IMDb, whilst fan site Rotten Tomatoes only awards it with a ranking of 29%. What did you make of it, Emily?
Well, I went to see Batman vs Superman last weekend at the View Cinema in Shepherd's Bush. I'd heard that it had received pretty mixed reviews, so had kind of rock bottom expectations. I'm happy to say I was pleasantly surprised, although I think that's because my expectations just were that low. I thought that the sound design and score were fantastic. It presented seamless action and fight sequences. Believable special effects were in abundance, which makes a nice change from some films of recent, London Has Fallen, and the costume designs were on point. The characters lacked development, I thought, and they didn't have any depth. And if you were new to the character of Batman or Superman, I think you could be easily left confused as to what their motivations were. I did feel the overall plot was a little disjointed. If it hadn't been, I might not have looked at my watch 2/3 of the way through. At 2.5 hours, it is a lengthy film. Although it had high production values, it had a confusing plot due to fragmented narrative structures.
To be honest, I haven't actually seen it yet. I do plan to, but I got the impression, interesting you say that at the end there, because I really got the impression that a lot was crammed into the movie, perhaps too much. I love that whole premise that Superman becomes mistrusted by the masses as a result of him being different, and that they were threatened by the unknown. That really worked on a lot of levels for me, and I just saw that in the trailer. But I've definitely heard reviews saying that there's far too much in it, and it could easily have been a couple of movies.
And it's just incredibly confusing. I think you're quite right that the premise of the film could work so well. I just think they kind of missed it, really.
Yeah.
We asked you on Facebook what you made of the film.
Ben White thought it was overly done in many places, with a lot of fresh content story-wise, packed into a short space of time. Like Emily, he found it better than expected after reading the reviews.
Ed Riley found it utterly dreadful, noting it to be misogynistic and racist. Actually, at 2 points, I felt that there were racial problems with this film. He also commented that the film had entirely unfunny jokes, and now thinking back over it, I realised that I didn't actually laugh once. Of course, the film is set up for a sequel. Here at Film Focus, we love to speak with special guests from the world of film and television, and this episode is no exception. A few days ago, I caught up with one of the world's leading feature film colourists, Paul Ensby, at the prestigious post-production facility Company 3, where he recorded with us 4 exclusive colourist commentaries of some of the films he's worked on over the last year, including Man From U.N.C.L.E, The Lady in the Van, Allegiant, and the Oscar-winning documentary Amy. I'm here in a dark grading theatre in Soho in London at the prestigious post-production house Company 3, where I'm excited to be joined by one of the world's top film colourists, Paul Ensby, who's freshly back from LA, where he's been grading new release the Allegiant feature film. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Emily.
How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very bronzed.
Very
but I'm
bronzed.
very pleased to be back in London, of course.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you here. In a nutshell, can you explain what a colourist does and how the grading process works?
Well, putting it simply as I can, every TV show or a feature film goes through a process before it's finally released where it has some form of colour correction. In my case, which is mainly feature films, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks, possibly sometimes more, where you're sitting with the director of photography, the editor, producers, and we go through and we change the luminance, colour, all kinds of different things that you would probably associate with more with Photoshop. Essentially, you're colouring every single shot of the movie, average of about 1,500 different shots per movie, and that's just an average. It's a bit like a painting in a way. Everyone has to come to an agreement, and it can be a very challenging process, but it's ultimately really rewarding. But the real basics are matching the shots together so nothing jumps out to an audience member, and then being creative as well and creating moods, styles, and the rest is all comes with experiences, knowing when someone talks to you about can something be cooler. You know that it needs more cyan rather than blue or green. You kind of can already judge what you need to make that shot look better and for the client to go, "Hey, oh, that's great." It comes right down to a real instinct for it. It just becomes very natural.
Other than correcting levels of lighting and matching up colours of shots within the same scene, what's the purpose of grading?
It's really to realise the director's vision. You also are creating styles or moods. It's not just about fixing. Films are shot some in studio, some location, some various weather conditions, which we'll see on some of the trailers we're about to see, but also, put it in really simple terms, if it's a comedy, you want to keep the colours up, and horror film, everything has to be pulled down dark, and not all of that is done on set. You're never quite sure what you're going to be dealing with. You have to manage the personalities, as we're talking about creative people, so it's a real, it's a real, you have to be a real diplomat at times as well. It's the director and producer's film, and as long as they walk out of here happy, then I'm happy, really.
Having worked in the industry for 26 years on high-end television and an impressive slate of feature films, no doubt those listening will have already seen several examples of your work. You're kindly going to give us an exclusive Colourist commentary of some of your most recent films that you've worked on in the last year, including Amy, The Lady in the Van, Allegiant and the super stylish Man From U.N.C.L.E. First of all, let's look at your most recent film, the latest in the Divergent series, Allegiant, which you've just returned from grading in LA, which came out in the cinemas a few weeks ago.
Allegiant, as you'll be very quickly aware, is a very highly computer-generated film. We've got a lot of the backgrounds you'll see here, and a lot of the actual buildings and the rain are all kind of computer-generated. So what we're looking at here is the what they call the fringe sequence, which has got a very particular colour palette, as you can see. Very interesting colours which we kind of designed with the visual effects team together. So the fact there's so many computer generated backgrounds was probably the hardest thing about this in terms of matching them in, making them look realistic to this. I understand the scenes which are obviously it's shot in a studio but very naturalistic. The overall colour gamut was pretty colourful, as you can see, quite high contrast, deep blacks in this sequence, more CGI backgrounds here going on with the Jeff Daniels sequence, more fringe material, very different outer world experience there. But I've worked with this DP a few times before. This is probably the most difficult project to work on in terms of the sheer amount of visual effects that are in the movie. We used what we call visual effects mats to time or grade or colour the background separately to the foreground images, so that we could make changes to the computer generated elements separately. And that was very important because it also saved us an awful lot of time, and the visual effects people could actually get their shots approved and into the cut just that bit earlier. There's some really interesting scenes and looks flashing through here. Fast cutting, all those backgrounds are all separately coloured, lots of blues and oranges. A very interesting challenge, and I got on board. I was asked to go to Los Angeles from the director of photography, who requested I fly over particularly just for that project itself, and I was there for 8 or 9 weeks. It was very challenging, but ultimately, we got there and we had limited time because the release date was already set, and we were working up to 3 weeks, 4 weeks before the release date.
I saw it last Friday. I was really, really impressed because it's basically a futuristic landscape. It's the Earth after it's been devastated with radiation. And the land is red, the water is red or blood, and that's all being created either with CGI or in your grading suite. And it's quite incredible. Yeah,
we had to do many pre-production tests because they weren't sure what direction to go with. They gave me some plates to work with, and I gave them about 10 different versions of all kinds of colours colours and different, layers of saturation, and they eventually picked out, a number 7 as the best one, and then we worked on that a bit more and concentrated and just narrowed it down with a bit of tweaking either end. Didn't help that those guys were in the States and I was in London, but we managed to get through it. Did a few sort of, conference calls, and we have a system here where they can view in the States what I'm looking at in London in real time.
That's incredible. I remember actually witnessing it about 2
yes.
years ago.
Right, okay. Well, even now it's gone crazy now, and believe it or not, you can actually, there's a system where they can have a laser pointer in their room and point it at the screen, and it shows up on my screen, which is
that is incredible.
Slightly, and I can't quite get my head around that yet. But
that's amazing. And next, on to the winner of this year's 2016 documentary category at the Oscars, Amy.
So Amy is rather different to most projects in as much that it's designed as a documentary all from archive material or all from captured material, or it goes from the worst flavour of material, which is YouTube, all the way up to a lovely high definition master from the BBC. And the massive challenge with Amy is that we have to somehow make that cinematic and palatable for a cinematic audience when you're blowing it up to, in some theatres, some quite big screens. So it's a very different challenge to what I normally have to do with when I've got a director of photography next to me who's got some idea of what it's supposed to look like, and this was very different. And sometimes there was a bit of compromising going on because the master material wasn't as great quality as we'd have liked, and that's mixed in with some camera footage, and it's all different shapes, sizes, formats. It's quite a challenge. It's a very different way of working, but ultimately, because there is no DP, the colorist kind of becomes the director of photography, who is the biggest collaborator to someone in my chair. They're the person that you kind of talk the same language as a director of photography, and you're there to help them submit to the director what he had in mind. So we can play this now. This is a very nice teaser trailer, I guess. It does show you some of the different images. So we start off, this is her obviously home footage. I had to sort of decolour this to separate it out from when she's actually an adult. That's been taken. So we had, as you can see there, this is now full colour because it's her in her glory and happy times. So it's a question of marrying all this up to try and make it as cinematic as possible. So we treated it in very much a film world, using filmic colours, if there is such a thing, but just taking away any garish, video-y reds and highlights, just to try and sit it all down so it looks like it's actually been photographed properly, which of course it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination. Particularly this kind of material, which is the paparazzi stuff, which is just captured on the street. Very handheld. There's a very nice master there from the Grammy Awards. So some was good, some was not so good, and it was a question of marrying it all together. So it wasn't jarring. I had to do an awful lot of reframing. Some of the material was square, oblong, any kind of thing, stretched, not stretched. So we had to put it all together and kind of make sense of it. In some cases we had to actually degrade the better quality material so it would match into something which wasn't particularly. So we had to put a little bit of softening in to help that. So that was Amy, but when you work on those sort of projects that you do feel really part of the production because you feel like you're needed an awful lot more and even creating part of the creative process. You're involved a lot more in the design and how things should look, and you've kind of got a bit of a free rein. We also kept, there's an awful lot of titles and credits on screen on Amy because there isn't a talking head, so it's all voice of, or you have to say the location. And often, depending on what was in the frame, we'd have to move these titles around. So we kept those all live as part of the colouring live.
For those people who haven't seen the film, the lyrics of Amy's songs form the plot of the film to a degree. Her words become the narration, and as we hear her sing, we also see the words and the lyrics appearing on the screen and they move around. So you obviously had the challenge of grading around those moving elements.
Yeah, like you say, they were very important. The actual font of that was based on her own diaries. They were kind of hand-drawn back out by a titles designer and placed on top of the screen in the relevant position, and then we decided they should stay there or move around depending on what I'd done with the background image. So they kind of had to be a real collaborative process between getting those two elements in. that was very important to the director, having the lyrics on screen, because like you said, he felt that was really the crux of it, and it really did ring true to her story. And aside from the lyrics, we also had all the captions, all the voices of. A little trick for those of you that are going to see the movie again or haven't seen it yet: every time there is a locator, you'll see it's got a little bit of colour to it. That colour is supposed to match something else in the frame, which no one has picked up yet.
What's a locator? Sorry.
So if you've got say Amy's bedroom, Camden.
Mm-hmm.
That Camden may be in orange, and that's because there's something orange, or she's got an orange sofa in the room. So you'll always be able to link something there, which no one's picked up, and that in turn is based on the cover of the Frank album.
Excellent.
So
I like that. I'll have to look out for that. And you must be thrilled that it won the Oscar for Best Documentary.
Yeah, especially thrilled, as I was in Los Angeles at the time as well. So I met up with the team there. They're a very nice team, very nice people, very down to earth. So I'm especially pleased for them.
It's a fantastic film. Thank you for talking to us about it. Now let's have a look at the incredibly stylish film from Guy Ritchie for Warner Brothers, Man From U.N.C.L.E, which was released in August 2015.
Okay, Man From U.N.C.L.E was a very glossy, quite nicely styled film, which we'll see when we look at the trailer in a second. This was a director of photography called John Matheson, who I'd worked with an awful lot. First collaboration with him was Kingdom of Heaven for Ridley Scott. Mm-hmm. And John is a very traditional director of photography. He loves working with 35mm film. He loves lighting everything as he wants it himself. He would still be doing his colour in the laboratory if he had a choice. Slightly less able to do that now in this digital world. He shot it digitally. We did actually add some film grain to give it some kind of texture. I'll talk through the look. Like I say, it's a very nice glossy looking. Actually, the trailer's it's got an awful lot of movement in it. That first shot actually is shot in the day, and we made it look like night, which was something in the boat sequence. Whenever that comes up, you'll see there's a bit of a mixture of real night and what we call day for night, where I have to make everything look very dark and set in. So, like I say, John Matheson does like to light on set. He doesn't do an awful lot of manipulation within the grade or the colouring. But really, this was all about keeping everything nice and rich. Everything was about the costume design, the production design, some lovely dresses and cars and outfits there. And the guys, everyone's looking super smart. So rather than go for a kind of moody spy, we went for a kind of quite a rich, highly saturated colours all round. Very 70s, almost like what we describe as ectochrome colour, so quite vivid blues and reds whenever they come up. You can see the sea there. We've gone to town a bit on the sea there. But generally, really smart looking film. You won't be able to see the film grain, but certainly on the big screen there was a little bit of film grain that we put into the image there. See, very nice harsh lighting all the way through, and this is where it gets super slick. John's he plays everything down in what he does, but he's actually very talented. You will think he's worked on Gladiator and Phantom of the Opera and all that, so he's very experienced. Lots of cuts. So when I said about an average film being 1,500, this will probably be more like 2,500 cuts in this film, because of the action sequences really. So most of it was based on real practical effects and with a bit of CGI to help sell it in many ways, or wire removals and stuff like that. But a very nice looking film, a film I'm very proud of how it came out, and sometimes keeping it simple, it doesn't, you don't have to go to town on it too much, and we really did that. We worked with what we had and didn't overcook it in too many ways, and it's come out really nice. Guy Ritchie's films have a certain flavour to them, and he likes that snappy style of editing, and I think that all plays a part as well. But yeah, certainly the design was really what I enjoyed most about it, definitely.
And for you, I imagine it's quite fun to work with a DOP like John Matheson.
Everything was there on screen, so we just made it look the best we possibly could, and it was mainly about polishing really, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel on that film. It was very
it's a highly polished film.
Yeah, and it's it's got a decent budget to it, which helps as well. So they probably had all the equipment they wanted to on set. So it's and that shows on screen as well.
Finally, let's have a look at a film I absolutely loved when I saw it last year. The charming British comedy, The Lady in the Van.
The Lady in the Van, it's kind of typical British medium budget film. The British weather plays its part, of course. Hopefully I'll be able to point out a couple of those when we look at the trailer. The overall palette was rather subdued, and also the main thing was getting the van actually to be the right colour as well. Okay, so here we are. This is a typical street, so very gloomy, nothing actually in the skies there to grab hold of. So the van, that was actually the second van that's used in the film, not the classic yellow. There's a very early shot of Maggie Smith as a flashback, which I tried desperately to make her look 30 years younger. Not sure if I succeeded very well or not, but you can be the judge of that if you see the film. This is the streets, and you see lots of sun. A lot of these are cut out sequence actually, but there's a lot of sun in and sun out issues. Very nice bunch of filmmakers. Another collaboration with a long-time DP friend called Andrew Dunn. So there's the famous yellow van. As you can see, it's just about getting enough light. In the background there was darkened off, so it was all about her. So a lot of the work is about putting in shapes to basically make the characters stand out. It's basically creating vignettes, which are areas of the frame which are darker than others, just to frame you. There you are, rain and then sun, although that is cut slightly out of sea. Lots of different colours. We've even put in a little bit of film grain into that as well, a tiny bit of film grain into that throughout, because it's set in, I think it's set in the 80s, I think is the main crux of it. Back to the amount of shots, probably below average I would say for that film. Nice slow panoramic views. The seaside shots you saw there, we did punch the colour up a lot on those because they were supposed to be like, oh, she's gone to the seaside, isn't it nice here? Even though the weather on the day wasn't that great either. So you're putting in a bit of extra contrast to create the sunlight. And very nice crew on that film. Nicholas Heitner, the director, is very famous for theatre productions, so done several in the past, such as The Crucible and The History Boys, with exactly the same film crew. He knows who he's working with, what he's doing, and he gets the best out of the actors and actresses, so he kind of leaves the rest of it to us. So on that film, it was very much myself and the director of photography working on that.
Was there any difference between the beginning of the film? I think it spans at least 16 years. Did you have to, especially when you did the flashback of 30 years, did you try and make that look a certain era?
Yeah, I think from memory I think we kept it very neutral, very grey. Did a kind of like a clean up on her face, trying to de-age her a little bit by bearing in mind she's in her 80s, so there's only a certain amount you can do. Yes, she's amazing in the film.
Yeah.
The other thing on that film, obviously, there's a character that's playing Alan Bennett. It's the same character, but there's two of them, so there's a lot of split screen.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that
yes.
because we reviewed it a few months ago. There's a point in the film where you have the two Alan Bennetts walking side by side with Maggie Smith in between them, and I have no idea how that's done. I can understand the notion of a split screen when there's nothing interrupting the divide.
And there's a few of those, yeah.
But how on earth did they do that?
Yeah, with great difficulty, I think. And that was the visual effects team's biggest challenge. So yeah, but it was still a split screen, but it wasn't obviously a straight cut. They were having to draw around every arm movement, everything that's going on, and Maggie was there in the middle. So in fact, in the cemetery scene at the end, between shooting one side and the other side, the sun did come and go, and it was actually going in between the takes. So my job was then to balance out the two sides of the frame as well as it was happening. So that was tricky.
Well, that was incredible. It's so fascinating to hear about the processes you went through to achieve these vastly different looks. If listeners have been inspired by hearing you speak, how would somebody go about forging a career as a colourist? I know that for you it was very much a family affair. How can other people get into it?
The times have changed now from when I got into it. I was kind of born into a film laboratory, and then it morphed into a digital world.
Not quite literally born into a film
almost. Third generation, so almost.
Wow.
So nowadays, with everything almost being exclusively digital in terms of the colouring side, there are various different routes. What a lot of people tend to do is start working at a facility. Starting point as a runner. We have colourist assistants, we have junior colourists, we also have colourists that work on set or colour time the dailies on a shoot every day, just to make them look palatable, and so that the producers are happy with what they're seeing every day, and the director of photography is happy with what you're seeing every day. And then if you prove yourself in that world, you kind of get more contacts, and especially when you get into the assistant colourist role, you might then tend to do a bit more of the actual colouring. Before you know it, you're in the room with directors of photography and directors, and you're getting known. Getting to know colourists and learning from them is very, very important. You have to have a certain eye for it. You also have, like I explained at the start, you have to have a certain personality for it.
And the patience.
Patience, yeah.
So you'd say to people to get experience within facilities and to, if they have any of the software, if they can go out and shoot something and then colour it.
And if they're into photography, And like I say, just think about every image you see. Think about how the light's captured, where the light's falling on someone. You're asking the viewer, or the director always wants you to look at what's important within each frame. And if you can help that tell the story, then that's your role.
Wonderful, that's some great advice. I hope that's been helpful to some people out there who you might have inspired over the last few minutes. I know that through doing such a fascinating job for so many years, you've got some incredible stories about the industry. Can you give us an insight? Most
of the stories I probably wouldn't be able to repeat. It's mostly based on the people you meet. Nothing happens with a room, well, apart from one time when it flooded, but I won't go into that. but I mean, I've met some amazing directors over the years, some real sort of legends of the cinema, and you're never quite sure what they're really going to be like until they walk in the room. The one that stands out for me more than any of them was Lord Attenborough. Mm-hmm. I was very lucky to work on his last feature film, and he was well into his 80s. He wasn't very steady on his feet, and oh my God, you know, what we're dealing with here, and he came in and was a complete gentleman, as everyone always says about him. And he was joking around, you know, we reviewed a film back for him, what we had done, and in those days, this was quite early, the processing power of the computers wasn't quite up to speed, so we used to have to run it in a slightly lower resolution than what it should have been. It was about half resolution. So it was a little bit soft. I mean, I'm talking a little bit. Most people never noticed it, and Richard Attenborough, being in his 80s, after about 2 minutes, he turned around to me and said, "Is this screen a bit soft?"
Excellent.
And I thought, wow, if I'm 88 or whatever he is and I'm still noticing that the screen's a little bit soft, then I'm doing something right. Yeah. But that just showed you what an eye he had. I was gobsmacked.
That's incredible.
He spotted it.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for having us here in your grading theatre. It's been absolutely fascinating, and thank you so much for running through all of those incredible films that you've worked on.
I hope everyone found it interesting who's listening to it. And yeah, keep going to the cinema. Who knows, you might end up in my chair one day.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
It's so fascinating what Paul's role entails. I absolutely didn't know anything about grading, so it was really informative for me to see that interview.
I think a lot of people don't, to be honest, Sarah.
Yeah, it's quite a niche one, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those elements that takes place and they don't actually get the credit they deserve.
Yeah.
And some films rely so heavily on its grading, and Amy is one of them. It's no secret that sadly the film industry and Hollywood in particular are male-dominated arenas, and that still today there are a whole array of gender barriers female filmmakers come up against in their careers. Dr. Marta Lawson's study, Women and the Big Picture, is the first study to track women's behind-the-scenes employment in the top 700 theatrical films in a single year, which was 2014. Overall, women comprised only 20% of all directors, writers, producers, executive producers, editors and cinematographers. This is a staggeringly low figure. Well, this month we'd like to shine a light on some of the incredible female talent out there. Here are 5 of our favourite films created by women.
We need to talk about Kevin from 2011, written and directed by Lynn Ramsey. It's about a mother who tries hard to love her strange child, Kevin, despite the increasingly vicious things he says and does as he grows up. But as far as he's concerned, Kevin is just getting started, and his final act will be beyond anything anyone could ever imagine.
Why did you select this film, Sarah?
I found this movie to be utterly absorbing and breathtaking. Literally each shot is so carefully constructed. It results in a resonant and vibrant assault to the senses, and the performances of all the actors were completely faultless. It was incredible actually, because Tilda Swinton, who's the lead in it, plays the mother, became involved as a producer long before she decided to star in it. And amazingly, this movie never got an Oscar nomination, which I think is utterly disturbing actually.
Disturbing like the film.
Although it did pick up some other awards, so at least it was recognised.
I've selected Belle, which is directed by BAFTA award-winning writer-director Amara Santi, and tells the extraordinary story of Elizabeth Bell, the daughter of British Admiral John Lindsay and an African slave. The film pursues the possibility that Belle influenced her white British guardian in legal rulings that would eventually lead to the abolition of slavery. Belle opened to phenomenal success, releasing first in the US and taking a higher per-screen average than Spider-Man 2 in the opening weekend. The film was championed by Oprah Winfrey. Meanwhile, in the UK, Prince hosted the Belle premiere after party in celebration of the film. The movie received widespread acclaim, making Amara Santi one of CNN's leading women of 2014. I was lucky enough to meet Amma when working on the Isle of Man Film Festival in 2014, where we screened the film, and Amma and Mark Kermode gave an intriguing Q&A about the film afterwards. It's undoubtedly powerful and tells an important historical story which has shaped our society of today. Some people might not know that some of the film was actually shot on the Isle of Man. We will also post on our blog the interview with Mark Kermode and Amma from the festival.
My second choice was Wayne's World from 1992, directed by Penelope Spheris, about two slacker friends who try to promote their public access cable show. I just think Wayne's World, in my opinion, is one of the best comedies of all time. It's a movie I watch over and over and over again, and I was very surprised that a woman directed it, actually. And I think that comes from just assuming that something like that would come from a man, and that's obviously incorrect. But obviously Mike Myers was heavily involved in it, but the script was actually also co-written by a woman, Bonnie Turner. Some of the lines were provided by Bonnie Turner, and it's absolutely hilarious. And there's such a bright and colourful tone to the movie as well. The whole thing just makes me smile, even if I'm in terrible mood.
I'm sure that never happens, Sarah.
I found it really interesting to find out as well that Dana Carvey, who plays Garth, modelled the character on his brother Brad.
Made for an estimated £200, Meshes of the Afternoon is an experimental film written, produced and co-directed by Maya Deren, one of the most important American experimental filmmakers and leaders in the 1940s and 1950s avant-garde filmmaking movement. The film was made in 1943. It tells the story of a woman returning home, which is played by Maya herself, and she falls asleep and has vivid dreams that may or may not be happening in reality. Through repetitive images and complete mismatching of the objective view of time and space, her dark inner desires play out on the screen. I first saw this film 10 years ago at university as part of a 20th century cinema course, and it stayed with me ever since. It was the first time I'd been exposed to experimental filmmaking and the surrealist dreamlike quality of the narrative. It really intrigued me. One image from the film has been a reoccurring inhabitant of my nightmares and dreams, the expressionless hooded character with a mirror for a face.
Ooh,
I know, it's
grim.
Pretty disturbing. Maya Deren was quite a remarkable woman. She wrote film theory, distributed her own films, travelled across the USA, and went to Cuba and Canada to promote her films using lecture demonstration to teach film theory and the interrelationship of magic, science and religion. Deren established the Creative Film Foundation in the late 1950s to reward the achievements of independent filmmakers. Certainly a woman who broke down many barriers.
And did you find out any interesting facts surrounding the film's production?
Yes, Meshes of the Afternoon was selected to the National Film Registry, Library of Congress in 1990. It's in many of those 1,000 films to watch before you die books as well, so do look it up.
My last choice was American Psycho from 2000, directed by Mary Harron, and it's based on the best-selling book by Bret Easton Ellis about a wealthy New York investment banking executive who hides his alternative psychopathic ego from his co-workers and friends. But as he delves deeper into his violent, hedonistic fantasies, he finds his mask of sanity slipping.
What about this film stood out to you?
I think Mary Harron did a remarkable job of translating a 399-page book into a polished, intense and faithful adaptation of the text. That's no mean feat. The book is full of lists and lists and lists of things that Patrick Bateman owns, and it's quite difficult to make what you're reading into something compelling and interesting on screen. I was convinced it couldn't be done, to be totally honest. I'm a massive Bret Easton Ellis fan, and I wasn't even looking forward to seeing the movie, and now I'd say this is one of the best films I've ever seen of all time. Apparently, Christian Bale based his performance of Patrick Bateman on Tom Cruise, saying he had this very intense friendliness with nothing behind the eyes.
Now that's the Scientology for you. So we've just given you 5 of our favourite films created by women. Of course, there were many, many more that we couldn't include. Please, when you go and see a film, go and have a look on IMDb, have a look who made it, see how many female filmmakers have been involved, maybe with the writing, directing or producing, and consider looking up other films that they've made, because that's how we will kind of raise more awareness about females working within the industry. If you caught our previous episodes, you'll know Sarah has embarked on an exciting journey to watch over 500 films in the next year. That's on average 46 films a month, 9.6 films a week and 1.36 films a day. So Sarah, can you give us an update on your progress? How many films have you watched and what's your favourite film since the last episode of Film Focus?
Anyone monitoring my progress will see that I uploaded a ton of reviews yesterday, but I still have quite a few reviews to do before I'm fully up to date on all the films I've actually watched. I think I'm up to around 170 films now, and my favourite would definitely have to be Eddie the Eagle, which I watched yesterday.
Which is currently in the cinemas.
Oh, it's so inspiring and absolutely lovely. And I think I expected a straight out comedic film, you know, maybe a little romance in there perhaps, I don't know. But it's so much more than that. It's wonderful.
Great. Well, I enjoyed your review of Iris, which now I've added to my want to watch list.
Oh yeah, you must. It's brilliant.
It looks a fantastic film. But if you'd like to follow Sarah's progress, go to YouTube and search for Sarah 500 Film Challenge. We'll also include a link on our blog page to her channel. I am enjoying following your journey.
Thanks, Emily. I'm finding out about so many films I probably never would have come across as a result of doing this challenge. But as ever, I would love to hear of any other movies the listeners think I should watch. Write me a message with any comments you have or suggestions of films I should include on my YouTube page. Before we draw things to a close for another month, is there any filmmaking news you'd like to share from the Isle of Man?
Yes, the Man in Shorts scheme on the Isle of Man has enjoyed an exciting 2016 so far, with a number of filmmaking workshops being held and 2 films shooting back to back in March. They have some further workshops coming up in April, such as sessions in assistant directing, editing and post-production sound. 3 short films will be shot using Man in Short's crew in the next few months. The first of these, Jean, is scheduled for the end of April. Man in Shorts is always happy to take on new trainees at any age and any discipline. Please contact Zoe at isleofmanfilmfestival.com to get involved. It's an amazing scheme I was fortunate enough to work on for about 3 to 4 years. Yeah, please do get in contact with them. It's an incredible resource that the island offers. Thank you for joining us for our 5th episode of Film Focus. We've had so much fun, haven't we, Sarah?
We have indeed.
Please check out the links in the audio and video descriptions below for more from Film Focus. You'll be able to find a blog post on this episode over on our site featuring related links, movie posters, trailers and a summary of our thoughts this week. There's also a separate space to leave your comments and have your say. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more from both myself and Sarah. Do join us then.
So that's a wrap on this week's episode.
If you'd like to discover more, find us on Facebook.
Simply search for Film Focus.
For screenings, reviews and filmmaking opportunities right here in the Isle of Man.
Thanks for listening to Film Focus with Emily Cook. Happy movie going!